Good morning. Who's a good boy?
What, you never seen a man dog before? Well, just getting ready for the season. It's here. We got Sunday, Halloween.
Yeah, it's funny because for people in the chat, like we were in the green room just before the broadcast, but he didn't have that on, so he snuck that on during the video, and I didn't see it. So that was a good surprise.
Well, try to keep it fresh here. Every week we've got to try to find something new to talk about, and Halloween's here. Might as well enjoy some silly rubber masks.
Yeah, Halloween is typically is a big thing at my house, but this year, we got a new pup, so there's two dogs in the house. They freak out at like the drop of a hat, so we're a little concerned as to what it's gonna look like on Sunday when the kitties every time they ring the doorbell, the dogs are gonna go completely nuts. And Mac, which is the youngest, he's a mix of German Shepherd and I think it's German Shepherd and Australian Shepherd.
Yeah, so my dog's part Dachshund, part Aussie.
Okay, so it's tons of energy, but also a very deep bark. So when he runs at the door and starts barking, it's actually quite scary for the person at the other end. Every once in a while, I'll get like a skip the dishes or Uber Eats guy or something like that, and also as I get to the front door, I see them like running down the driveway because they've heard the dog, so they just drop the food on the front step and run.
Well, we've got another jam-packed show pre-Ignite, because we got Ignite next week. And so while there's some stuff that we're going to talk about today, know that probably the next time we do this, we're going to have a whole lot more to talk about. So if you haven't registered for Ignite yet, I really recommend you do. There's an easy way. You can just go to aka.ms. I'm going to put it in the chat for everybody. /Ignite, and you can register there. It's free. It's available for everybody across the globe. If you want to see a lot of amazing talks, hear about new features and products, Ignite is typically the place to do it. It's built for developers and ops people to get the most out of what's new in Azure and Microsoft general.
Yeah, and speaking of event, you had one this week, or was it this week? Last week?
Yeah, we did Create DevOps, which was a fun time to be able to share a huge conversation on DevOps across the speaking to members of across the community. So we all got together. It was about 3 hours. We had 2 hours worth of talks, and then we had an hour's worth of a workshop. All that's available on the Azure DevOps YouTube channel. If you just do a search for Azure DevOps YouTube, you should be able to find it there. The video is ready for you.
Okay, perfect. And I was trying to find the the learn page for Create DevOps, but I'll link that into the chat later. So it went well. I'm glad. I'm also finishing. I have also finished a big event for us last week.
Yeah,
DapperCon, which is the reporting is done. The stats are in. Was a good success. It was fun. But what about this week?
Yeah.
What's new this week?
Well, I got a chance earlier in the week to talk to, or I should say, talk yesterday to Julien Dubois, who Java master, if you will. Really a great conversation on how to use NoobsGen. And I think we might have touched on it once before. NoobsGen is a really great way to kind of kick off deploying your application using Terraform and using it with a GitOps methodology. And if you haven't learned a lot about GitOps yet, if you go over to my channel, you'll be able to get a nice little introduction from Julian, who, his whole thought process was that deploying to Azure should be one Git push away.
And I'm getting a note in the chat. It's talking about with the public cloud and the push for DevOps in organization, what's the future for IT pros? I don't think we have enough time in this show to cover that, but let's just say it. Let's state the what is obvious to us. Is that IT pros are the key to operations, and operations is a major chunk of DevOps. So we're not going anywhere. We are more than very important in the equation, and
yeah, I feel like we had this conversation, you and I, in our planning yesterday, where I kind of just said that, ops is always going to kind of be a part of the process of even within a DevOps organization, because infrastructure management, monitoring, alerting, now what's also known as observability, being able to do things like, on-call rotations, these are all still important parts of the IT experience, and I don't really see people going away. DBAs got worried when databases as a service became, popular, but
and now they're near than ever.
Yeah, now DBAs are managing the data that are in services like Cosmos DB or Azure SQL. You don't have to manage the underlying hardware anymore, and I think that it enables even IT pros to be able to work more on automation and things like that.
Yep. All right, so let's get going with the news. So this week is a little thin in terms of like real news, mostly because everybody's kind of holding on to their news item for Ignite next week. And we have to be careful. Our boss just jumped into the chat room. But for the first item, general availability, Azure Backup now supports archive tier through the Azure portal. Now, what does that mean? Last August, we announced the support for archive tier through Azure portal. It really means that we enabled you to be able to take some of your retention points or your backup images in an Azure backup vault and drop them to a lower tier of storage, and therefore saving your some cost. Because if you're backing up your entire infrastructure or your entire workloads to Azure, it needs all of that storage. So it allows it to go to a colder storage, deep cold. So the very optimized for long stay, but not for read and writes. So when you actually need it, it'll take a little longer to get it out, but it's a lot cheaper long term.
And IT pros can still really consider themselves a part of this process, even though it's automated. You'll need someone to actually, and here's something I always recommend: like, you have backups, but have you tested them? Have you made sure that you know how to recover them? Have you checked your database backup process and your disaster recovery? You understand how everything works. So, understanding RTO, RPO, and how all those things fit in, it's still a big part of the IT pro and ops experience. And so I don't see any of that going away. And services like this that actually just extend what people have to do, it really makes a lot of what we do in the cloud.
Absolutely. I was talking with Dean Wells, which is a principal program manager here at Microsoft. And he was saying that his department, or the what they're going towards, is that they don't have a backup policy. They have a restore policy, and the backup is implied because the backup is not considered complete until it's been restored and tested.
Yeah. In the bad old days, I remember going through a lot of scenarios where we had backups, but they weren't really usable. Databases were always like the big part of that, especially around databases that you needed to have like a freeze of the block device or something like that, or you needed to be actually stop transactions in, say, an SQL or MySQL database. So finding ways to actually take a lot of that out of your workflow and offload it to a service is just great. And then being able to just make restoration plans and make your return to recovery point objective and your return to operations objectives the most important part, rather than the scripting something to make your backups work.
Yeah. So this month, basically the only thing that has changed is that it's almost like last August when we released it, we weren't finished. So this month we actually lit up this service where you could actually look and manage your recovery points and move them to the lower tier through the portal, through Azure CLI, and through PowerShell. So you can automate a lot of that stuff. Saying as soon as you get a new full backup, the last full backup can be offloaded to the other tier, and that can be automated. So this is new. But now in line with what was once since August only available through PowerShell. Now it's available through all of the management capabilities of Azure.
Definitely makes it a lot easier for people to get started.
That's right. Next item on our news list is yours.
Sure. Red Hat OpenShift is now in preview for Azure government customers. So that's federal, state, local governments and their partners. If you haven't worked with Azure Red Hat OpenShift, it's our Azure implementation of using Red Hat's enterprise product for managing Kubernetes clusters. So in the enterprise, there's a desperate need to have more things connected.
Yep.
And giving you a single place to look at it. And so, we use something like Azure Arc for Azure natively, but you could have, resources and Kubernetes clusters that you want to use that are on other cloud providers because you're in a multi-cloud scenario. You can have all of your clusters monitored and managed, and information about performance in Red Hat OpenShift. Some of the new features in the government offering is there's some new VM options and disk encryption options. So OpenShift supports creating machine sets for worker nodes using Azure Spot virtual instances and virtual machine instances. And that's huge because we want to make sure that our pricing around our scale makes sense. And so spot pricing helps us, get the best possible price at the moment. Previously, you can only encrypt OS disks with auto-generated keys. Now you can bring your own key, store them in Key Vault. Another big thing that people just like having a little bit more control around when it comes to some sort of compliance, internal policy, whatever it is. Now there's also end-to-end encryption to encrypt on your host using Azure storage. So you've got more platform keys, things like that, or platform managed keys that you can have. That's part of that. You don't need to actually do the rotation and manage it yourself. And the roadmap, there's more things that are coming that people really want to see. You can see there's our board on the options that are going to be part of it in the future. The work that our team is doing, they like to have it out in the open. So you'll be able to go to the project section of GitHub and take a look. Yep. So I think just expanding our reach to build things that are made for governments means that we're just going to add more hardening, more security, and create a more safe environment for users to actually deploy their code into Azure and feel secure about it. So I think that this is a great new offering. OpenShift, it's a really great product. And like I said, single pane of glass, Kubernetes, wherever you have it managed. And also big part of that is if you're a regular Red Hat enterprise customer or a Red Hat customer in general, a lot of times you may already have some familiarity around that ecosystem. And so being able to have it native to the Azure cloud environment definitely helps people work with things that they know.
Yeah, and that's the part that to me is the highlight here is with Red Hat OpenShift, and it's the same for VMware, our VMware solution on Azure. It really becomes it doesn't really matter what your workload is and where you're running it currently. We are facilitating and enabling you to actually expand or migrate or diversify your workloads into Azure without having to like basically rip and replace everything you have. You can basically like grow with your existing stuff. So if you're a VMware customer, great. You expand with VMware on Azure, and that's it, and it works. And if you're an OpenShift person, then you don't have to relearn everything from scratch. You just extend your OpenShift to Azure.
And I don't think we know everything about multi-cloud solutions quite yet. I still think that multi-cloud is very young, and we're still learning about how all our different providers and services that they have can work in tandem. Yep. So, there could be some stuff on another provider that you find is what you want to use alongside Azure, or you have existing services that are in your even private cloud that you may have in a data center. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, there's got to be a solution to connect it all together and simplify the visibility of all the different resources you have.
Yes. All right. And our next item for the news is general availability. Whoa, rented mouth this morning. Of Azure governance policies for Azure Key Vault. I'm actually quite excited about this one. Because I've been using Key Vault, and I've always been, and Rick knows that, he's in the chat, the automation, kind of automating everything that makes sense, but also monitoring and auditing and compliance is very important to me, mostly because of my previous lives as a corporate director. So when I found out that Azure governance for policies for Azure Key Vault was becoming available, it really struck a nerve, because now you can actually run audit reports on your Key Vault. You can specify by policy your key length, for example, or when they need to be refreshed, or block, and that is really important to me. Like in production, you may want to actually block somebody from being able to create self-signed certificates in your Key Vault, because you want to keep it secure. You have a automated or audited process, depending on whether or not you're high assurance. You have an automated and audited process to create those keys so that they go into the right place and being leveraged in the right way. Well, if anybody's allowed to just create a self-serve key or self-signed key, then it kind of defeats the purpose. So with Azure governance policies for Azure Key Vault, you can actually now start managing this as the corporate resource that it should be, and report on it, and audit it, and also block it depending on the environments that you're at. So to me, this is a huge thing, and it couldn't be at a better time.
Yeah, like I just said, and we got to automate all the things, we got to secure all the things, and the more options that we have to do so, and the less kind of friction that comes along with that, we can always improve our security posture. And that's a big part of the shifting left strategy, is to be able to think about security earlier in the process, and being able to encrypt things and then set policy that allows us to ensure that the things that we expect to be encrypted, the things that we expect to be available, we don't necessarily allow for anything to go into that process. We, like you said, you don't want self-signed keys. You don't want necessarily everyone to be able to store a secret if you don't think that that's necessary. You may only want particular secrets that are added. So, Anthony, great part of that, Anthony, as he said, cloud governance is everyone's responsibility, and make sure you have an open dialogue within your org when setting governance. And I got to agree with that. Just like the security is everybody's responsibility, how resources are created, managed, that's a big IT ops responsibility, but everybody needs to actually agree on how it's implemented.
Yeah, but there, in my views, there are some significant differences between security and governance. Security is obvious in terms of when we were talking like the key vault, to have the proper rights in the key vault, or who's allowed to read the key, who's allowed to create the key, who's allowed to list the key, who's allowed to purge the keys, like all of that. And there's two models right now, which is a bit of in my opinion, confusing for a lot of people. You can have the access policy model within Key Vault, and now you have the RBAC, the Azure role-based access control in Azure for Key Vault. So there's these two. So for the security part, that's it. For the governance part, it's really how we want to manage our resources as a whole, and security is definitely a part of that. But I think it's a lot broader. And as you mentioned, everybody, like your stakeholders, IT, dev, and management has to agree on how we're going to manage those. But IT has a tremendous voice at that table.
Yeah, there's got to sometimes be someone that really develops the policy that everyone understands and says, okay, well, people who are developers, they should not be able to create these types of resources. They should only create this type of resource. And maybe it's you want your developers to be able to use web app service so that they can test things. And maybe you want them not to be able to spin up virtual machines because you don't think that they're properly secured. Maybe they're not patching them up to patch. Maybe they're not closing the right ports. And that's another great thing is with Azure Blueprints. If I'm right, you can set policies up to be able to do governance around even the simplest things like port numbers that are open. Like I know we've got Azure security configured for all of our demo accounts. And I can't just spin up a server with port 22 or the RDP port open. I have to follow the policy that is across our organization that states that we need to spin up servers and we need to do it in a secure way using a private link or something like that. Or use something like Bastion rather than have public ports open.
True. And blueprints, governance, and you're mentioning like in certain situation, that's the beauty of it, is because you could have a policy for production and a policy for dev, and in dev you can let your developers create self-signed certificates because it's dev, but not in production.
And what's nice is it doesn't all have to be in the same resource group, things like that. You can set up and actually have some organization. So you could set up a resource group for just your development team, and in there set up a policy just for that particular resource group that states you're only allowed to create this and you're only allowed to add this to those resources. That's huge. It's a big part of being able to really put some safety gates around your cloud.
We are coming towards the end of the show. I wanted to give you the opportunity to introduce our Learn module of the week, considering it was one of your news items.
Sure. So we're going to talk about Introduction to Red Hat on Azure. Red Hat, one of the longest lasting providers of Linux and Linux tools. They've been around forever. I remember installing my first batch of CDs of Red Hat. I think it was like maybe 5. And that was before they had their enterprise edition up. And there's always stuff to learn about how to use the OS images for VMs, because you may want to have your RHEL enterprise configured and you want it to have access to certain packages that they make available. So Ubuntu may not be right for you. You may have some sort of policy requirements that state you have to use this enterprise version. And then there's also stuff about OpenShift So you can go, you can take a look at the OpenShift modules and understand how this all comes together. This module actually does some Java related deployment. And so, like I was mentioning Julian Dubois before, Java also still a big thing we can work with in order to deploy our applications.
Yep. There was a time where like Red Hat was considered like the enterprise Linux distro. So
Absolutely.
knowing how, and it's different than Ubuntu, which is the one that I'm using most these days. So you do need to have like working knowledge of how it's different and whether or not it's right for you. And I really appreciate you suggesting this learn module, because it's now on my list of things to cover whenever I get some downtime and I need to learn something new.
Yeah, and not only is Red Hat available on Azure, there's all these different types of enterprise Linux versions like SUSE that you can use if you need. I'm pretty sure Oracle Linux is up there. I'm not really sure off the top of my head, but there are all these enterprise class versions of Linux that come with support directly from the vendor, and that's a big difference than what Canonical does with Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a great product. It is something that the community has driven and made a huge part of the Linux experience. However, we do still have tried and trusted vendors who you can rely on to, release package fix updates when things come out there. And I've always appreciated that. Paul, said that he also was once Red Hat Enterprise Linux certified. And you know what? That's another thing that they provide that not Ubuntu typically provides you with, is an actual enterprise level certificate that states that you are an expert on this particular piece of knowledge.
Yep. Speaking of knowledge, coming up, now that we're going into our community events next week, as you mentioned, is Ignite. So make sure to register. I know Rick's been tweeting a lot about some new types of sessions, sessions like light board sessions, which I'm really intrigued as to how that's going to work and learning from that, because I'm a visual learner, so I need to see it. So somebody who like does pictograph as explaining something really speaks to my type of brain. So I'm looking forward to it. Steve says there's a crew party at his house on Sunday for Ignite, but I guess the crew parties are going to have to be virtual this year again. But if you want to get together with your friends and with your colleagues and watch and comment and chat about Ignite, we still have our IT Ops Talk Discord server, and I just created a MS Ignite Fall 2021 channel where we will be hanging out all week. So join us on IT Ops Talk Discord server, which I believe I probably have not set the banner for it yet. No, is aka.ms/ITOpstalk-Discord. So come and join us online, and we can have a good time and learn bunches with Ignite.
Got it up there, right there for you very quickly. What can I say? I got fast fingers. But hey, we're just about a time.
Yep.
I'll catch you after Ignite, Pierre. Have a great weekend. And always, everybody, thanks for being in the chat. We really enjoyed hearing from you.
Absolutely. Ciao, everyone.